And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate. Lots to get into here as we continue our conversation if Vegas is right. That's right. Our very own Bud Elliott, a couple years back, proposed the thought that we can look at the expectations for the upcoming college football season in terms of hot seat, in terms of what it means for the trajectory of a program, just by using those Vegas expectations. FanDuel, where you can make every moment more, does have win totals. We will be using those for the Big Ten Conference here in just a little bit. Bud, very excited that you're back joining us once again. Are we feeling good? We feeling strong? Yeah. We got our juices back?
Yeah, strep. I think I beat it, so yeah, we're good.
Whoa, easy on beat it, okay? Because I mean, I remember January. I remember our repeat flus. I remember the bounce back. So listen, we'll be knocking on all the wood that we can right now. I'm coming to you here from Fort Lauderdale in studio, where we'll be doing some college basketball coverage all throughout the rest of the week. Lots more to tell you about that.
Are you on the high floor that has the carpet near the bathroom, or are you on the lower floor, which is not the suite, since you're in Lauderdale?
Are you talking about my hotel, or are you talking about
that's a key one? You got to make the choice.
Okay, so we've got the divided bathroom where the actual shower part is no carpet, but your sink part is carpet. So it's not quite as funky, I guess, as the carpet. Stepping out of a shower onto carpet, it's not great.
Yeah,
great. Not great.
Yeah, but you don't slip. There's zero chance of slippage.
That's the risk we live. Come on.
Do you not know how to walk?
0% chance of slippage.
All right, let's. Hey, listen. While we are a little bit loose here, I need to turn our attention to something that in the college football workroom was identified as just absolute peak off-season content, because an actual story in the Associated Press in the United States of America in 2025, the headline reads, West Virginia coach Rich Rodriguez bans TikTok dancing. You're not banning TikTok because, as Rich Rodriguez says, well, they're going to be on it. I'm not banning them from it. He says, I'm just banning them from dancing on it. It's like, look, we try to have a hard edge or whatever, and you're there in tights dancing on TikTok. It ain't quite, actual statement from the AP. It ain't quite the image of our program that I want. I'm allowed to do that. I can have rules. 20 years from now, if they want to be sitting in their pajamas in the basement eating Cheetos and watching TikTok or whatever the hell, they can go at it, smoking cannabis, whatever, knock yourself out, close quote. From Rich Rodriguez. And if we thought that the Rich Rodriguez era at West Virginia was going to bring us some entertainment based on the on-field aspects of Rich Rod's offensive style and the way that he was going to try to revitalize the Mountaineers, boy, he's given us some off-field stuff too. Danny, you are in a leadership position of a TikTok-forward and TikTok-friendly family. What do we think about banning TikTok dancing at West Virginia?
Well, my daughters don't think we're too TikTok friendly, as I've got them locked down pretty good on screen time limits, all those types of things. I love this take from Rich Rod. Yes. I absolutely love it, because you know what I think? The first time I saw a Bama player putting out a TikTok from the locker room, I'm like, they're done. Dynasty's done. Like, you thought it was watching film and seeing it on tape? No. The minute I saw that happen, I was like, they're toast. When was the last time you saw, and I think it was, there's been a bunch. I mean, there's been all kind of videos. They go viral. Florida State's had them. When was the last time you saw a TikTok video that players posted and you were intimidated? Like, oh, whoa, can't wait. How are we going to beat this team? No, you do look soft. You look weak. So I love this. I say good luck enforcing it, but I love it. He's not the only one. Matt Rule actually was talking, when he was talking about the spring games, he said that he caught a couple players that were posting TikToks from the weight room, which was against policy. So he had them run as a little punishment. He alluded to that. So he's not the only one. I love it. I want more of these rules. In fact, I think The ACC needs to do something to step up and try to close the gap between the Big Ten and SEC. I think it should be conference-wide. Jim Phillips, step up to the plate and ban TikTok from the football facilities.
Oh, actually, no. What the ACC will do is they will allow Florida State, Clemson, and Miami to do TikToks, but nobody else.
No, they're all brought to you by New York Life. You can do TikTok. Yeah, you can do TikToks, but they're brought to you by New York Life, and we get to add it into the Florida State slush fund to be able to pay them out at the end of the year as time slot champs. It's so funny. Like one of my favorite comedians right now is a guy named Roy Wood Jr. And one of his hooks right now is progress then backlash, and it's like one of the ways he talks about sort of the way the pendulum swings in our society, and it's like progress, players are getting paid, backlash, Rich Rod says no sir, you cannot dance on TikTok right now. It's the way of the universe. Do you think that players will respond? Bud, do you think players will respond to this message?
I mean, I think they'll probably follow it. I think a lot of college coaches don't want their kids dancing on TikTok. I probably wouldn't want mine either. So I don't think it would be that big of a deal. They definitely don't want you doing it in the facility. I think that's a common refrain. It's like, let's stop making all these TikToks within the facility. But I guess the flip side is, where are the kids you're recruiting? They're on TikTok, most likely. And if you're proud of your facility, then having your guys proud to show it off is probably a good thing, actually.
That's fair. I'll take that. Do you what is the last TikTok that y'all have seen, or what's the last time you saw like players in the facility doing something that you like laughed at, thought was engaging, something that was of value?
I have a TikTok, but I don't know my login. I know AJ posts, like, somehow posted to my TikTok when I make these vertical videos. When
Shout out to AJ always.
But I don't actually know what login it is. So
I am not on TikTok. I have never been on TikTok. I don't know. I've never seen one. I'm an old man. I don't put it on my phone.
I just launched TikTok after talking to Mackenzie Brooks and Jordan Giorgio. They were like, "Oh, you got to do it. You're missing out." I don't feel like I'm missing that much. Like I've been on it for a couple months. I've only posted a handful of videos. There are some unique ones, like the kid from FGCU. Did you see the kid that went viral? The basketball player. He's going the road to 1 point. And
yes.
He's been doing it for like a year now. He's got like 2 million followers. We had him on the radio show. Great kid. Like, he's funny. Like, it's fun. He's making fun of himself. That's kind of different. That's not really what we're talking about.
So he's going the Mark Titus route?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Club Trillion.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, there are ways to market yourself. I mean, there was the kid at UCF, the kicker, who, got in trouble with the NCAA. At least now they're able to monetize it. But yeah, there's not many. Oh, it's a basketball player that was singing in the locker room all the time from Duke. That's in the Washington. What the kid? I
thought Jared McCain always got like cooked. That's the one for the TikToks. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. He got cooked. That's what I'm thinking about. He had a massive following. I was watching a Duke Carolina game. This is when he was still there. And my daughters walked by the TV and they go, "Oh, that's the TikTok guy." They had no idea like the magnitude of Duke, North Carolina, but he had built this following. But again, it goes back to my point. When was the last time you were like intimidated by Jared McCain? Like, he looks soft as Charmin when he posts those videos. Like, it's brutal.
Hey, listen, all I know is the Bama dynasty was dead when they got on TikTok is about as like a great of a heavy hit as we're going to be able to get.
Do you know, so on a more serious note, this is what I would concern me if you guys are not on TikTok a lot. Most of the trends that go viral, I mean, this is a little behind the scenes. Most of the lyrics in the songs are ones that are definitely over the line. And if you're a white guy singing along with some of the rap lyrics, like, that is the last thing you want. Like, in a more serious note, like, I've had to talk to my daughters about that. Like, hey, watch what you're posting, listen to the words. And they're like, "Oh, it's just this dance." But I'm like, are you listening to the words? And worse, if you're singing along to them, you get caught in a really bad position with that. But Mackenzie, so speaking of Mackenzie, she was here at the house where, with the whole crew watching stuff. Brady, my 12-year-old, wanted to make a TikTok with Mackenzie. They make a TikTok. I come back. I'm like, "Oh, that's cute. They're over there doing a little dance." I had to have a little conversation with Mackenzie as my fourth daughter, telling her, "Hey, we need to clean up some of these lyrics. You're dancing with a 12-year-old. And it was F-bombs were dropped, like sexual innuendos. I'm like, "What are we doing? Come on."
Well, Hey, I mean, we're going to do it later, but what better time? Speaking of the aforementioned Mackenzie Brooks, she will be joining me in this very studio because on Thursday and Friday from 3:30 to 5:30, we have conference tournament sweats. And it might even go longer. If we're still sweating here in the sauna, if we've got a game that we're dialed in on, we want you to come and join us in the chat. You can find it on the Sportsline YouTube channel. Again, Thursday, Friday afternoon, we're going to be firing off live bets, live parlays, and going all wall to wall throughout all of the afternoon conference tournament action. Again, that starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on the Sportsline YouTube channel, Conference Tournament Sweats with Mackenzie Brooks and myself. Well, coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Big Ten in 2025. What do the preseason win totals tell us about what we should expect from the coaches under pressure? All that and more next.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast as our If Vegas Is Right series takes a look at the Big Ten. And I'd like to begin at USC, where you've got a big general manager sort of a heist, I guess you could say, right? Getting Lil Bowden from Notre Dame, that's sort of throughout the industry, gets a lot of like nods, a lot of thumbs up. He meets with the media and he immediately starts to call back to the Pete Carroll era, right? Reporters are asking him like, what is your game plan for building a roster at USC? And he says, if you go back to those championship contending teams under Pete Carroll, they were built in Los Angeles. They were built in California, and that's what we have to do. He is saying all the right things that you need to get USC fans excited about how Lincoln Riley can, as he was hired to do, lead USC back into championship contention. However, at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, their win total for the 2025 season, 7.5. And last I checked, 7.5 does not have you competing for the Big Ten championship, certainly doesn't have you competing for the national championship, probably isn't even in the college football playoff conversation. Over is at -118, under is at -104. I mean, this is a very much 7-5, 8-4 proposition. Tom, if they're 7-5 or 8-4, what does that mean for Lincoln Riley in the future of the Trojans?
It means he's on the hot seat, Chip. Like you look at their schedule again as we go through all this stuff. It's like a lot of this depends on who you beat and who you lost to at the end of the day. Like some wins could buy you a little bit more, but like if you're USC, the good news is when you look at your schedule next year, LSU's not on it. The opener has been replaced with Missouri State. So, okay, that should be a win. But you look at it and they should start off 4-0. But then they get to at Illinois, Michigan, at Notre Dame, at Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa, at Oregon, UCLA. So it could be a rough finish, and we know how recency bias often dominates these decisions. So if they get to 8-4, I don't think he gets fired. I think that he's fine, and there's more optimism going into next year, kind of being like, all right, next year we have to take that step forward or we're done and we're moving on. If he goes 7-5, I don't think I still think he gets another season, but I don't think anybody's happy.
Yeah, I think he's probably safe at both of these numbers because the buyout is rumored to be pretty huge. But would it really be all that crazy if this might be a crazy that connecting the dots, right? But where was AD Jen Cohen before she was at USC?
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Where was it? Was it Washington?
Washington. Who did she hire at Washington?
DeBoer.
Yeah. Would it be that wild to get DeBoer out to USC and like you let Riley out of this crazy thing? And maybe he wants out too? I'm just saying, like, that could happen. I think USC was better last year in some ways than its record showed. But at the same time, like, you're still USC. They want more than just, hey, play well. Like, they want you to play well and also win the scoreboard. There are some games on here that I think are pretty telling. Like, if you lose at home to Iowa, this is year 4 for Riley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you're pretty pissed as a USC fan if you're losing home games to Iowa, right?
Mhm.
Like if you lose a home game or to a second-year rebuilding Michigan State, I think you're pretty annoyed at that. Like you better not lose both at Nebraska and at Illinois. Like if you lose at Notre Dame, a really good Notre Dame team, if you lose at Oregon, nobody's happy to lose, but I think those are more like acceptable losses. It's the rest of these that I think if you're a USC fan, you probably do. And I think it's kind of justifiable to say, like, why are we losing to some of these teams? Like, this is not okay. This schedule is a lot easier than it was last year. It's a bottom half schedule in the Power Five. It's one of the easiest in the Big Ten, I think, even when you factor in the Notre Dame game. So, yeah, I think their fan base would be pretty pissed off if they go 7-5. 8-4, I still don't think they'll be very happy with 8-4.
This is one of those programs, too, that's pretty unique with a pretty vocal former player group that comes out, either guys that are in media like Matt Leinart that start coming out saying this is unacceptable, you know, big name form, Reggie Bush, like other guys that get frustrated because they're used to the glory days. So that makes things complicated. I do think Lincoln Riley, and it's been thrown in his face because no one wants to hear we're close. They were really close last year. Like they took over Penn State to overtime, like incredible game, but they also lost to Minnesota and Maryland on the road. Like there were some ugly losses, again, close losses, but I'm with you guys. I think if he's 8-4, it's kind of the continued, it's almost been a perennial hot seat. Because even last year it was like, this year has to be big, and then it wasn't great. So I think it amplifies some of the heat and it, you know, amplifies the conversation. But I'm with Bud, the buyout, from everything you've heard, I mean, 90 million, 80 million, whatever it is, it's pretty steep. So I think barring any catastrophe, even at like 7-5, I think there's frustration and it really gets loud. I think he probably gets another year.
I also think if you're a booster there, they signed some kids in that class who I will tell you, like as a recruiting industry, we're very much like, oh, they're way more concerned about the bag than they are about the ball. And so if that doesn't work out in the cycle they just signed, if that doesn't work out, then I think there's real heat from those boosters. Like somebody's cutting those checks, right?
Yeah.
And like they were after some of these studs in Georgia. They had them committed for a little while. I think all of us out east were like, yeah, I'm sure that's going to last, right? And then they, thankfully, with the new GM hire, they've kind of stopped that stuff because you're not going to go unless you're really, really humming like Carroll had it, or unless you have crazy money coming in like a Texas Tech type situation, or maybe like a Larry Ellison at Michigan. You're not going to pull these studs from Georgia to come out to Cali for the most part. Not when they're like, hey, look at the taxes, look at all the other stuff that if you live in Georgia, you constantly hear about California. So like they're very, very selectively recruiting out east now, and they're going more like keep the players at home, as Tom mentioned, which I think is smart. But in this class they just signed, man, they better hope some of those kids work out, because if not, I know that some of those guys didn't come cheap, and I think there's a really high kind of boom bust factor there.
There's so many parallels to Lincoln at USC to Brian Kelly at LSU. They both were in the same coaching cycle. They both had 2 years of an incredible Heisman winning quarterback and underachieved with them for both of those years. They didn't accomplish what they should have accomplished. Like that USC team in Lincoln's first year was very close. If Caleb doesn't pull his hamstring in the Pac-12 championship, who knows what happens? Yeah. But still, it's gone backwards since. Like they have regressed every single season. So and you look at Brian Kelly, good start. It's not as big of a regression, but has kind of regressed every season since. And now they go into this year, and it's, I mean, no disrespect to the kid, but like you've gone from Caleb Williams, and then last year you had Miller Moss, and then you went to Jaden Maeva. Like how many of the four of us are super confident that Jaden Maeva is going to be the guy to get USC above the hump?
Grant in the tailgate actually mentioned that right when we got started. He just simply posed the question, do we trust Maeva? So what do we, but I feel like you're already going to ask the clarification. What are we trusting him for? Are we trusting him to be an operator? Or are we trusting him to be like a fighter pilot, bus driver, fighter pilot? Shout out to Barton Simmons. Like what is the reasonable expectation for Jaden Maeva?
I mean, look, USC clearly felt okay with Branch and Deuce leaving, right? And they feel really good about what they have there at receiver. I think offensive line should be okay. So that I believe they think that they have the pieces around him to be very successful. But it would not shock me if the freshman played, right? If Longstreet plays for them, like that would not be a total shock to me.
Let's keep this thing moving on with the Wisconsin Badgers. And this one was a double take because we understand that you are doing a lot of rebooting. You know, we were changing over things offensively. We're starting to mix things up defensively as well, just throughout the coaching staff for Luke Fickell. And the over-under win total at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more for the Wisconsin Badgers, is 5.5. Jeez. Over at plus 128, under at minus 158. This is priced towards a 5-7 season. How the mighty have fallen, Danny. I mean, if what does a 5-7 season mean for Luke Fickell?
It's not great. I think he might be out, right? I mean, I love this hire coming from Cincinnati, the way he brought in. I like his personality, thought it was a great fit. Clearly missed on the offensive coordinator hire, trying to make magic this time around. They've missed on 2 transfer quarterbacks back-to-back years. And I love it. And, last year it was like, man, the schedule's brutal. And even Luke Fickell was like, well, that's what we're given. No excuses. Again, it's not the easiest. Man, I think you got to make a bowl. If you don't make a bowl, I think you're probably getting axed.
They just gave him an extension, by the way.
Yeah,
February
tack on a year or whatever.
But right. They tacked on a year. I'm looking for the buyout information here. Look, he has had some bad luck there with, but they took a transfer who wasn't like eligible for I think Title IX reasons, and then like the quarterback gets hurt. But this is the prime example of, hey, some of y'all are not as good as you think you are, and you've just been propped up by the Big Ten West. And now you have to play all these teams from the East consistently, and they have better players than you almost all the time. And I mean, they're drawing Ohio State. They're at Michigan. They also go at Oregon, at Alabama, at Indiana. They host Illinois. Like, Illinois is a good football team, right? That's probably the 5th or 6th toughest game on their schedule. They're at Minnesota to finish the year. They better start 3-1. Like, you cannot be losing at home to Maryland. You obviously, you'll beat Miami, Ohio. You'll beat Middle Tennessee. I would assume you get a home game against Iowa, sandwiched between at Michigan and hosting Ohio State and at Oregon. Like, that's not easy.
Well, you push back on the Big Ten West, but like the Paul Chryst operation, like, did they have it better than they realized with Paul Chryst?
No.
Well, don't you think what's his name was kind of shadow running that program for the longest time?
Alvarez?
Yeah. That's what everybody said behind the scenes. Like, he was really kind of still running it in a certain way. Obviously they lose Lucas to Miami with the portal. Like, that hurts.
I don't think the division switch helped, but I think that the decay started before that. I think if you look, like, they had the 9-win season in 2021, but even in the COVID year, they were 4-3. Like, the recruiting had dropped off, which is one of the main reasons Chryst was ousted, not just the wins and losses, because they just didn't like the direction the program was heading because it was backsliding.
Yeah. And
then they bring in Fickell. And like you, Danny, I loved the hire. I thought Fickell, considering what he'd done at Cincinnati and considering what I figured he was going to be able to do to revitalize the recruiting at Wisconsin. I thought, okay, here comes somebody who's going to reestablish the identity for this program. He's going to get the recruiting kick started again, and they're going to start winning games again. They might not be the 10, 11, 12 win team that we saw in the West, but they were still going to be one of the better teams in that, outside the top tier. But it just hasn't happened. Like, I think part of it is there's no identity. We don't know what they are. When Fickell first took over, it was the dairy raid. But then you heard the last few years, Fickell wasn't really a fan of that narrative surrounding the team, wasn't really a fan of the way that they were running their offense and the play calling. And we saw that kind of play out with Phil Longo being let go at the end of the year. So that's a factor, I think, that's gone on behind the scenes. Then obviously the Tyler Van Dyke injury kind of throws everything into the whatever last year, because then you're dealing with Braden Locke at QB, and no offense to Braden Locke, but that is not a guy you're going to win a lot of games within the Big Ten. So you bring in Billy Edwards, who at least had some success at Maryland, but you've got the new offense. Are you going to run the ball more? I don't know. I think Billy Edwards is probably an upgrade on what you had, but you look at this schedule, and I think part of it too, going back to recruiting, Wisconsin has always recruited Florida, and they've always gotten skill talent from Florida, and I think Fickell is maintaining that. What they've lost is the trenches at home. Like, if you go to Wisconsin and you look at the high school football in Wisconsin, the one thing they produce is big, beefy boys who can play on your offensive line. They might not be ultra athletes, but they fit the style that you want. Illinois has kind of taken that over in the last few years, because when the recruiting was backsliding under Christ, Illinois kind of stepped in, and they've continued that, and they've been getting a lot of those guys. And Wisconsin just hasn't had the results on the field compared to Illinois to start wooing those kids coming back to Madison. So I think you need to win games this year, A, if you're Luke Fickell, just because you're kind of on the hot seat, and B, just to kind of get that program going back in a direction where you want it to be, where you can be competing for playoff at-larges. And last year they missed a bowl game for the first time in 22 years?
Yeah.
You miss a bowl game for the second straight season? I don't know what Fickell's buyout is, but I don't know how much patience they're going to have for it if he doesn't get back to a bowl. So I think if they finish under this 5.5, I think he's in very, very serious trouble.
What is the AD who hired him still there?
McIntosh?
Like, is that AD tied to the hire?
I believe so.
Because that does matter. Like, there are sometimes an AD is going to give a guy more grace and fight for him if he realizes, shoot, if I fire the guy I hired, like, I'm probably out too.
Yeah, he's still there, but he has another hire coming though. He gets one more. You know how that works.
Okay. The other thing I would note here is who you have on staff matters, and a lot of the staff that built Cincinnati recruiting wise did not
Notre Dame.
Wisconsin. Yes.
Yeah, it's all Marcus Freeman's staff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce of the Cincinnati Bearcats and their run, to multiple double-digit win seasons, eventually the college football playoff. You look at that Notre Dame staff. That's the secret sauce for where Notre Dame is at right now. Again, Wisconsin 5.5 wins. Real quick sidebar: over under 2.5 jobs change in the Big Ten after next season.
Over.
Yeah, there was no movement this year, so outside of Walters, so just the way things typically go, over.
Like, you could have retirements, you could have guys deciding to go back to the NFL.
2.5.
2.5.
I'll say under.
Okay, because SEC and Big Ten, we did the SEC on Monday. Great conversations. Go check it out if you haven't already. We've got a lot of these that are right on the edge, where if the hat gets passed and there's somebody motivated enough to cut that check, things could happen. Is there motivation to make a move on Mike Locksley if this team goes 4-8? Because Maryland's win total at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, is at 4.5. We're split fairly evenly, over -115, under -105, 4-8, 5-7. I mean, it is anything short of a bowl going to lead to a change at Maryland, or does this have to be a total bottom falls out type situation for Locksley, somebody who has appeared, relatively safe? When you say Maryland football is a spot where, whether it's, boosters, fans, administration, there is not a thought. And maybe it's from the fact that when they joined the Big Ten, they got thrown in the Big Ten East when you had to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and a Michigan State program that was running hot at the time. But it's not like they set unrealistic expectations for Maryland football based on what I've been able to observe. Yet, like a 4-8 type season without any steps forward would at least need taking a step back and assessing things, right?
Yeah, and it's not just 4-8 overall. They were 1-8 in conference play. So I had opined in a column I wrote last year that about Mike Locksley potentially being on the hot seat last season if things didn't turn around. I heard back from some people who would know much better than I that, considering the 3 seasons he had before, there was no way that Locksley was going to be in any trouble no matter how last season finished. If the second straight season of that happens, maybe. But you kind of get to the situation where, and I think, this is important, even though it's not something we discuss too much. How much does Maryland really care? Like, they joined the Big Ten. They're getting the money. Is it that important to them to be competing for playoff spots and that kind of stuff, or do they just want a competent football team, whatever for people? And then you've seen what happened with basketball this year. Chip, you're closer to Maryland fans than I've ever been, even because they've only been in the Big Ten for a short time. What sport has always mattered more to that fan base?
Oh, basketball.
Exactly. So if the basketball team is winning at the rate that it's winning, I don't know how much pressure there will be on them to replace Loxley if they have another bad football season. But you look at their schedule. Like, they should start 3-0. You get Wisconsin on the road. We just talked about that. That's a winnable game, even though I doubt it. But they do have your former quarterback, so maybe there's a revenge narrative. But overall, like, this schedule is really damn easy compared to most Big Ten schedules. There's no Ohio State. There's no Penn State. There's no Oregon. You get Michigan, but it's at home. You get Illinois on the road, UCLA on the road, Rutgers on the road, Wisconsin on the road. Not the most devastating road schedule that you could find. Like, there is opportunity there for this team to take a step forward. So if they don't, I do wonder what kind of situation Loxley would find himself in. I think it depends on how bad the losses are more than anything.
Okay, I mean, I think the number of losses, if you go 4-8, the most likely path to 4-8, if we had to pick out games, is what? Beat NIU, beat FAU, beat Towson, and then beat at UCLA, maybe hosting Michigan State to end the year. Although I think at that point you're probably on quit watch. Hosting Washington, yeah. I mean, I struggle to find a way in which 4-8 is never good, but I agree with you, Tom. Like 4-8, when none of these losses feel like extremely acceptable, even to a Maryland fan with reasonable expectations. Like Michigan, certainly, yeah. If Michigan's back, that's different. But everybody else here, like, I don't think Maryland's cool with, like, yeah, let's just automatically chalk up a loss for Indiana. I don't think Maryland is cool with, like, let's lose at Rutgers. Let's lose. I mean, if you're a Maryland fan, you're like, they only took Rutgers to get the cable boxes for the old Big Ten network, like that. Like, and now we're dogs to them on the road. That's a little wild. I think 4-8 might be trouble. Yeah, even if it's a program without great expectations. This is a gift schedule that you don't always get. This is the schedule that you were hoping to get when the division's disbanded. And if you don't do anything with it, I think you're pretty pissed.
Did any Maryland football fan think, thank goodness the New York Jets didn't hire Mike Loxley when he interviewed for that job in January?
No.
None. Like, so they're like, and that maybe that's more with like the fan apathy. Like maybe they don't care that much, but I think it also speaks volumes. I think in fact, most of them would have been like, yeah, please take it so we can get a new start. But they're only paying him $4 million a year. It's kind of like, if you can just get to a bowl, which is probably a pretty good accomplishment. We're going through that schedule. It's not like there's many games you're chalking up as W's. The fact that he did have multiple 8-win seasons is pretty impressive, even with the schedule. So,
they put like a couple guys in the league every year. They don't have real like high level Big Ten depth, but they have a couple of players on both sides of the ball almost every season that you're like, that guy is a difference maker who could show up at almost anywhere else and be able to jump right in and be considered a peer. So you are recruiting talent. You are putting talent into the NFL. The nature, Mike Loxley, former offensive coordinator, he has often had like good wide receivers, good skill position, which makes the viewing experience exciting. The hires have been pretty good. I mean, just got, what was it, Pep Hamilton, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
They did lose Brian Williams, who I thought did a nice job for them as the DC.
As the DC, because we were saying that a lot when we were breaking Maryland games. I mean, that's the Maryland spot. Love to take them when they're a big underdog to cover a spread and not win the game because they're well coached.
Of Inside Maryland Sports did report that Ted Monticino, the new DC, is going to be more aggressive. So that's usually what we hear. I'm sure that's what he was told. They're going to have.
Are they going to be multiple too?
I don't know about multiple. But I think this is important to Tom's point about how the losses may come. Guys, they lost a ton on the D line.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that proves to be their downfall, it means you're getting pushed around a lot by Wisconsin, Nebraska, UCLA, certainly still kind of pro style, wants to run the ball. Like Indiana ran the ball pretty well last year. Rutgers is going to run it 45 times. You think Illinois might like seeing a worn down D line for Maryland just a little bit. Michigan, Michigan State, like that's a tough stretch for a unit with that D line and probably cannot afford any kind of attrition.
Yeah, and before the Maryland fans that love football come after me, I know I know it. I'm an Illinois fan who cared far more about football than most of the fan base. I'm not saying you don't exist, but using Scott Van Pelt as the measuring stick, I don't see SVP in random mentions talking crap to people about Maryland football. See him doing it about basketball all the time, though.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say on the comment there from Quantrell Knows, Maryland is underachieving at this point. What is the realistic expectation for Maryland? Like they only the Ralph region in the ACC, which again is a different landscape, had them 3 times to 10 wins. But other than that, it's been a lot of 6 wins, 5 wins, 7 wins, 6 wins or worse. So like the fact that Mike Lotzley got into 8 and 5 back to back, like that's a pretty good run for them.
Yeah.
I guess you have to set the expectations of what you're supposed to be. And I know, again, it's kind of like Tom said, you're not being harsh. It's just a reality. Like not everyone in this landscape, maybe when we get parity and there's a revenue share and it's evenly distributed, but you just don't have as much talent as most of the teams you're playing against.
I think part of it comes when you look at Maryland's recruiting territory where they're based. Like there's a ton of talent there. But again, making the comparison to what I dealt with as an Illinois football fan, a lot of talent in Illinois too, especially in the Chicago area. The problem is everybody's recruiting it.
Yeah.
And when you're Maryland or you're Illinois, you don't have that same kind of traction with all of those players. Although you do get some of them. Like we have seen Loxley put together some pretty damn good recruiting classes with some high-end talent. It's just he hasn't been able to build a team.
Right.
You're not going to.
Is a ton of talent.
If Mike Loxley can't.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a great recruiter.
Guys, but it ain't going to happen.
There's this thing called.
No, we're not going to tut Maryland fans for.
I mean, like take the checks, take the losses. This is an example. Like, you're around that talent.
There's these things called airplanes that players can get on and their families can. So it's not that big of a deal to go to Penn State. As somebody mentioned, they raid the DMV, which is 100% right. But so does everybody. I mean, like you are going to lose the top players to Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and probably a lot of other Michigan State. I mean, you could go down a list of teams that the players are probably going to go to if they have offers from both those schools.
All right.
Yeah, Penn State might have a runway issue, but yeah, I get your point more than most.
Not in those little regional planes.
In my lifetime, how many bowls do you think Maryland has made? That's a pretty good measuring stick, right?
I would bet they've done 20, 22. Wait, hold on. Your lifetime?
Yeah.
Okay, 22.
No way.
A little bit lower.
Lower? 18.
17.
Lower.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not a great.
Maryland
Aren't you 39?
Yeah, Maryland has gone to 14 bowls in 39 years. Okay? If you're making bowls in the Big Ten half the time, as Mike Loxley has basically done, that's a hell of an achievement. I don't care how much talent is around you. You're not going to get that talent. Your fans don't care that much. As we just said, you don't have that kind of NIL money, right? You don't have any kind of tradition. You don't have it. Like, that's not going to happen. If you're making bowls like 3 out of every 7 years, as Loxley has done, that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Like, that's what your history says you are.
Do y'all remember, and I've called this quote out before, I believe it was at Maryland Athletic Director Damon Evans at the groundbreaking for a new athletic facility, said something along the lines to reporters of, we did this fundraising in the wrong era because now kids would get dressed in a trash can for $20 million. Or $2 million or something like. I mean, it was just like something along the lines of like we passed around the hat. We did all this fundraising. We did this huge construction project, but that was the old way of trying to attract recruits because now we're in this new era where how fancy the touch screen is on your locker room doesn't mean anything compared to what that NIL check is going to be. Lots of interesting stuff to keep an eye on there in College Park. I wanted to shout out Nebraska here because Matt Rule has, built and he's stacked and he's trying to, get this thing back to where Nebraska wants to be. But similar to, Maryland, I think that defining the expectations can be a little tough. At FanDuel Sportsbook, the over-under win total is 7.5, over -122, under +100. 7-5, 8-4. I mean, given the investment, given the bluster, given the quarterback, I think 7-5 would be a disappointment.
I agree that it would be a disappointment, but I don't think Matt Rule would be in any trouble.
Okay.
Because that would be a second straight season going to a bowl where you hadn't gone to a bowl for 9 years. I think the recent failures of Scott Frost will buy Matt Rule far more patience. And I know that there was a ton of hype going into last year because of Raiola, and now he's entering his second year. They did get to a bowl, and you're hoping that you could take that step forward. I think if they go over this and they finish 8-4, everybody's very happy. I think if you finish 7-5, you're not super thrilled, but I don't see an outcome here where Matt Rule's in real trouble, no.
I think I agree with you. I do think Matt Rule is still a good football coach. Does Nebraska have bigger expectations than that?
Ultimately, yes.
Yes.
But are they realistic expectations?
Not this year.
There's no Oregon and there's no Ohio State. You get Penn State on the road, which I think is where you want them, because you don't want to waste a home win opportunity. You're not going to beat Penn State at home, most likely. I mean,
you know who's not doing anybody any favors in these conversations? Kirk Cignetti in Indiana. Because when we talk about expectations, we're all set the bar low, and then all of a sudden you see a team like that. And if I'm a Nebraska fan, I'm like, wait a second, Indiana just made the playoffs, and we can't get 8 wins. I think it's an anomaly. I think it was an outlier. So I get it, but I mean, that's probably where the high expectations come from.
Here's a scenario that I don't think is likely at all, but could look great at first and then play out poorly for Matt Rule. If you look at their schedule, it is not crazy to think this team can start 8-0.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Their first 5 games are at home: Cincinnati, Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan, which at home, Michigan finished 6-6 last year, 7-5, not exactly an unbeatable team. Michigan State. Then you're on the road for Maryland, who we just talked about, not very good. Then you're on the road for Minnesota. That'll be a tough game. But then you get Northwestern at home. It is not insane to think Nebraska, if Dylan Raiola takes a step forward, is 8-0. And then you finish with USC, at UCLA, at Penn State, Iowa. So it could be a rougher finish. But this is a team to me that I think can go any number of directions. I do think that there is a floor of they will get to a bowl game with this schedule at minimum. But I do think there is room to have kind of a spike season here if things go right.
I think that's why there's some pressure, because this schedule is not hard, right? This is one of the easiest schedules in the Big Ten. The non-con is a joke. Am I reading this buyout right? So they would owe him 90% of his remaining base salary.
Something like that, yeah.
Which is 50.1?
Probably.
If I did the math right on it. So I totally agree with Tom's point. First of all, that's a huge buyout. But, man, okay.
Also, didn't the guy who gave it to him leave?
For Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another school with an epic buyout history.
Okay, so tell me this. What is the most palatable 4 losses on the schedule if you're going to go 8-4? What 8-4
Penn State.
makes Nebraska fans most happy?
Penn State, Michigan, even though that's at home.
Because Michigan could be good. There's
Right.
the Michigan is a 10+ win team scenario.
I don't think you want to lose to USC, but I don't think that would super anger anybody. I think the only games you can't lose are the Iowa game at the end of the season, and then Northwestern, Michigan State at home, Maryland on the road. I think those are games where it's we need to win these games.
So the 4th would be dropping a game at Minnesota?
Yeah. I mean, Minnesota's been so solid the last few years that I don't think any Nebraska fan's going to look at that as well, that's a terrible loss. I think they'll just be yeah, that makes sense.
So your wins then would be Akron, Cincinnati, HCU, which I think is Houston
Christian. Yep.
Michigan State.
They used to be Baptist, and now they're more inclusive. Is that right? Houston Baptist goes to Houston Christian. We're opening the doors now to everybody.
Is there a Houston Islam?
I'm going to vote. I'm just going to guess no, but there could be an academy. I mean, if there was Upper Room and Word of God, then of course there could be.
There's an incarnate word too. In that,
Mhm.
Where's that? Is that in Houston or is that in
It's in
Texas.
It's in
somewhere.
Texas. It's in Texas somewhere. Apologies to Cam Ward's alma mater, but one of his 3 alma maters. But I don't know.
If you're Nebraska and your wins are Cincinnati, Akron, Houston Christian, Michigan State, Maryland, Northwestern, UCLA, and Iowa, and your losses are Penn State, USC, Minnesota, Michigan, I mean, doesn't that feel pretty hollow?
Yeah.
How many good teams did you beat? Maybe one in Iowa, and Iowa's projected to go 7-5. Like,
We will be keeping an eye on it for sure. Listen, we are next week after Selection Sunday going to be doing the NCAA tournament bracket as though it's the college football teams participating. That will, just like it was last year, be my entry into the Cover 3 Bracket Challenge. And we want you to be a part of our Cover 3 Bracket group. Brackets are back, and you can get in the madness today on the CBS Sports App. Enter the Bracket Challenge for the chance to win a new Nissan Armada and trips to the 2026 Final Four. You can also run your own men's and women's bracket pools with friends and join our pool. Play today on the CBS Sports app or visit cbssports.com/play to sign up. No purchase necessary. See terms and rules for details. Well, speaking of March Madness, I'm going to jump in the studio next door to get everybody set for the day's action of conference tournament action. More Big Ten talk with the fellas. So coming up on the other side, what do win totals mean for coaches in the Big Ten? All that and more next.
I feel home when I see the faces that remember my own. When I'm with my friends, I feel home.
All right, welcome back. Chip is now busy recording problematic TikToks with Mackenzie. We still have a few teams to go to, although I do feel like we've hit all the Big Ten schools where there are like legitimate questions about whether this coach is on the hot seat. I think everybody else that we're going to get to here is pretty safe. So we'll just kind of quick fire through this with you guys just for your initial thoughts. Like Deshaun Foster is entering his second season at UCLA. They went 5-7 last year, which I think overall kind of exceeded most of our expectations for what that team was going to do, particularly after Deshaun's speech at Big Ten Media Days got off to a pretty bad foot. But their win total at FanDuel, Make Every Moment More, right now is at 4.5 wins, heavily juiced to the over. If this team goes 5-7 again, how do you think that impacts Deshaun going into his third season, Danny?
It probably enters that season with a little bit more heat. Again, I don't think 5-7 gets him fired. Probably 4-8 doesn't even get him fired. I mean, I think it would have. I think he's kind of locked in there. Again, this is a program that Chip Kelly left because I think he was frustrated with the lack of support in the NIL market. So it also kind of tells you like how much angst is there from the boosters and the alums. I don't know if it's that significant. So I think it kind of, unless things completely come off the rails and they're 2-10, I think he's fine. And I think also last year, the thing that was pretty impressive was the finish to the season, because they started off and they finished 4-2 down the stretch, which was pretty impressive. Played some pretty good teams, pretty tough, and got some good wins. So, but I would probably say the expectation is probably you just want to see a little bit of improvement, which may even be the same record, maybe 6-6 if you get there. But I think the expectations are pretty low at UCLA.
I agree they are. I thought you saw some improvement during the season.
Yeah.
Like that game against Hawaii, we can go back to our group chat. Like that was alarming. They couldn't get the right number of players on the field repeatedly. I think you saw some improvement in him making the change at offensive coordinator because Eric Bieniemy was not that just wasn't working out. And so I think they upgraded a lot getting Tino Sansuri. And they played hard. Like Deshaun, they really did not quit. These guys played hard the entire season. They beat Iowa, right? I'm trying to remember that late night game when Iowa got their quarterbacks hurt. But I mean, you're UCLA. You're going to need some breaks. This is a tougher conference that you moved into. The schedule is
mean.
One of the tougher in the Big Ten.
Mean.
It's not on that Wisconsin level, but mean, find me another Big Ten schedule that is clearly above these guys, and I don't really see it. So I think 5 and 7 would be good work for them. If they find a way to get to 6 and 6, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, what's truly impressive about UCLA winning 5 games last year is they only scored 18.4 points per game. And as you mentioned, they replaced Bieniemy with Sunseri for a reason. But to put that in context, folks, 18 points per game is about 10 fewer than Iowa scored. And think of how often we make fun of Iowa's offense. So for them to win 5 games doing that, if they can improve on offense, this might be a team able to handle that schedule. Ohio State, Ryan Day, you think he's still on the hot seat? He's at 10.5 wins. If they go 10-2, are they going to kick his ass out if he loses to Michigan again? Bought time.
I think he's probably okay.
He's okay. But I ran into when I was in Louisville with my daughter for the club volleyball tournament I was at. We were at an ice cream place, and this family they were like, they wanted to talk Ohio State football. And this little kid was probably like 13, 14 years old. I was like, hey, you got to be fired up about Ohio State. And I was like, national championship. I said, do you think you're going back to back? He goes, I don't know. I just want to beat Michigan. It is very forefront of the mind, but I think we can all agree he's safe for another year at least.
Oregon's is at 10.5. I mean, Dan Lanning's not in any trouble. I think if they go 10-2, honestly, I know it would be a step back from last year, but considering the move at quarterback, I feel like 10-2, their schedule is not overly difficult, but that would probably be a pretty decent season for Oregon because that would get them into the playoff. The other team at 10.5 is Penn State. And I feel like they're a 10-2 season from them. Tell me if you think I'm wrong here. That's a disappointment. Like, considering all that they are putting into this team, bringing everything back that they are, the changes they've made at defensive coordinator, poaching Jim Knowles from Ohio State. I feel like if the Nittany Lions go 10-2, people are going to be kind of upset.
I think I think they'll be pretty disappointed, especially if it's 10-2 where you're not winning the Big Ten. 10-2 doesn't even guarantee you get back to Big Ten title game. So,
do you know what it would be similar to? Ohio State 10-2 last year. Like, and that won't be as ramped up because there's not a Michigan on the end of the schedule. But I do think it will put a lot of pressure on them in the playoffs to make a deep run, potentially to Final Four or even the championship game, to alleviate any of that pressure. Like, I think it really amps up the pressure on them if they do go 10-2.
Yeah, like if they're 10-2 and the losses are Oregon and Ohio State, just feel like a group of that fan base is already pretty restless. They just get more restless. Although I don't think anything is going to happen to James Franklin unless they go 6-6. Michigan's is at 8.5. That might be lofty a little bit compared to what we saw last year and what they've lost.
I mean, juice is way over too. Like they're really. Is this the easiest schedule in the Big Ten? It's one of them.
It's one of them, but they got Oklahoma on the road in their non-con, so that's going to be a tough game. They've got Nebraska on the road, USC on the road, so those games become a little tougher. You get Ohio State at home, and that's an automatic win for Michigan at this point. But
they just have so many should be gimmies, right? Like, I mean, you have
some of those last year too, though.
Well, I think that's the point. Like, if you go 8-4, I think Michigan fans start to get real worried about Sharon Moore.
Mm-hmm.
To me, 9-3 to 8-4 is a big difference. 8-4 means you had 2 slip-ups that you really shouldn't have. I mean, Wisconsin they have an over/under 5.
Yeah, I agree with Bud. I think
Washington.
We're losing you there, Bud. I agree with you though. I think if you go 8-4 and you're a Michigan fan, like I don't think they make a move on Moore after 2 seasons. But I think there would be a lot of pressure on him going into the 3rd year.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, early this season, it was kind of like, is he going to survive year 1? So, there's already a lot of, and then thankfully they salvaged it, had the massive finish to the season with wins over Ohio State and Bama. But there was still some angst there from Michigan fans. So I'm with you guys. And I'm trying to figure out the 4 losses where you could find it acceptable. I think there's 3, maybe, but I think if it 9-3, like if one of those, like if it's Oklahoma on the road, at USC on the road, and Ohio State, like you can live with that. But anybody else, it's kind of like, we're better than that. We shouldn't be losing them.
I mean,
and then it would be, where's your big win? Like, who are you beating then that's impressive?
Like, Danny, there's an 8-4 where you don't beat a single team that goes to a bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, like we talk about on Nebraska 7-5 feeling very hollow. Michigan 8-4 is going to feel super hollow. unless they beat Ohio State, and then everything's all good and like there's no problems.
All right, so the last one Chip has on this list here. This is Chip. What the hell are you thinking? He's got Iowa at 7.5 wins. The over is at +138. The under is heavily juiced at -170. So clearly, we think the Hawkeyes having a 7-5 season on the way. If Iowa goes 7-5, does Kirk Ferentz retire in air quotes? No. Nuh-uh.
He's never going down. I mean, what does he make? 7 or 8 million? It's a pretty nice setup.
Kirk runs that school. What are we talking about here? Like Kirk will sit down when Kirk feels like sitting down. Like I do think 7-5 would be a disappointing season with this schedule though, because your non-conference is Albany and UMass, and then obviously you get Iowa State, and that's on the road this year, so that will be tough. But in conference play, your road slate is Rutgers, Wisconsin, USC, Nebraska. Not overly simple, but not terrible. And then you get Indiana at home. We don't know what Indiana is going to look like. Like, it's a completely new team again. They could be great once more. They could go back to just being kind of average. Penn State's at home. Minnesota's at home. Oregon's at home. Michigan State's at home. You don't have Ohio State on there. You do have Penn State and Oregon, but they're both coming to Iowa City. And that's not the easiest place for some teams to go. Wouldn't it be a shock to me if Iowa pulls one of those off? But still, if you put 5 losses on there, let's say Penn State, Oregon, they lose a close one to Iowa State. Maybe they lose on the road to Wisconsin and Nebraska or USC, 2 of those 3. I don't think you're happy, but I don't think Kirk Ferentz goes anywhere.
I think he can kind of call his shot at Iowa.
Yeah.
So is 7-5 really that bad? Their schedule's not crazy easy. So I don't know. Like if he went 5-7, then maybe we're talking. But I think 6-6 is fine too.
Yeah. Some other schools we didn't talk about. Rutgers, unless the floor completely bottoms out after what was a pretty solid season for Rutgers last year. They were one of the better offenses in the Big Ten. Unless they suddenly go 2-10 again, I don't think Schiano's in any kind of trouble. I think he's pretty much a made man there, pun intended. Michigan State, Jonathan Smith's going into his 2nd year. You want to see progress, but he's not going to be in any trouble if they don't get to a bowl game. I don't think so. Do you?
No, I think he's largely okay.
David Braun at Northwestern.
What's their expectation?
That's the thing. I don't know.
They do have some money.
Yeah.
Like I know from some schools that try to like take kids off their roster that are like, oh, Northwestern actually pays some kids.
Has Greeny signed a new contract recently?
When does the new stadium open?
A couple of years. I think I think they will wait until that's
new
the thing.
stadium?
I don't know. Yeah, like because they're putting a lot of money in that stadium. So it's like I don't know what the buyout situation, because they're a private school, but I don't know what the buyout situation is with Braun. I can't imagine it's that.
Right. He was the
Punitive.
interim coach elevated.
Yeah.
Did he get a
He got a new deal, yes.
He did.
So like because they had that really great season his first year. So I don't think it's going to be nothing. It's just I don't know what the appetite will be for Northwestern to make a move on that after all the money they're currently spending on this stadium. So I would say he's safe. And then who else haven't we talked about? Purdue, Barry Odom's in his 1st year. Illinois, Brett Bielema's not going anywhere anytime soon. And Kurt Cignetti in Indiana, not going anywhere anytime soon. Agree?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the Big Ten. So you predicted, you said the over-under is 2.5 for how many new coach openings there are?
I think so, yeah.
And you said over?
Yeah.
Name the 3.
Wisconsin, Maryland, and I think a wild card, like a surprise.
Ooh, James Franklin takes the LSU
Michigan.
job after Brian Kelly gets fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Danny, did you say under or over?
I said under.
Name them.
Probably that to me is more. I would say Loxley I'm worried about. Who was the other one Bud gave? Because I agree with that. Oh, it was
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm worried about
Michigan.
Pickle.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the wild card is like, what happens if Ryan Day runs it back and goes back to back? You know, the NFL could come calling. That could be one where it's like, all right, does he make that jump then? It's always kind of been out there. Yeah, there could be a wild card in there too. But I'm going to go 2.
All right. Well,
NFL could come calling for a couple of these guys, even if they don't want it back.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lincoln gone. All right. Well, that feels like a good place to wrap up the show here. Thank you to Chip for joining us for part of the show before he left us to go be with Mackenzie recording TikToks. Bud, Danny, thank you for being here for the entire show. And thank you to everybody who came live, even though we started an hour earlier today than we typically do. But don't worry, tomorrow we will be back at our standard 11 a.m. Eastern start time. We hope to see you then. And I want to send a special shout out to David and Lindsay Pollock. Sending you love and thoughts your way. I hope everything works out wonderfully there. And yeah, that'll do it. Danny, Bud, thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
See ya.
See you guys.